Zenos. Lots of differing opinions about him as a big character in Final Fantasy XIV, and in this video, I want to talk about my long and tumultuous love affair with him. As looking back on my experience playing the MSQ, my opinions on Zenos changed multiple times, and ended with him being one of my favorite characters in the whole game. Big obvious spoiler warnings for the entire MSQ ahead. Zenos' introduction from a story point of view in Stormblood was exactly what I needed at the time. A big problem I have with story in lots of video games that is actually pretty persistent in Final Fantasy games is the unstoppable nature of the player characters. Don't get me wrong. Final Fantasy XIV story is my favorite piece of fiction, period. However, there's definitely glaring parts where the story ended up lacking for the necessity of it being a game and it needing gameplay. For example, back at the end of 2.0, the threat of the Ultima weapon had the nations of Eorzea almost surrender outright to the Empire. But then they decide to fight back, and their grand plan to defeat the ancient Allagan superweapon that had them all quaking in their boots? Just send us. Surely we can handle it. Don't get me wrong. It's a Final Fantasy game, and we needed to fight the Ultima weapon in the epic climax, obviously. But time after time, there's some super powerful god or ancient dragon or some world-ending catastrophe, and we, as the player character, just beat it in a trial. And then comes Zenos, who not only kicks our asses, but is bored to death while doing it. This was a great introduction from a narrative point of view. We thought we were hot shit coming off of the primals and dragons of Heavensward, and then get the rude awakening that there's much bigger fish out there that we didn't even know existed. And then there's Zenos' character, who is refreshingly simple. He just wants to feel something, and the only time he does is when he's fighting for his life. Unfortunately for him, he's stronger than everyone else. Let's skip ahead to the end of 4.0, when we have our epic showdown, and Zenos is so happy he offs himself. He realizes that nothing will ever compare to the high he had in our battle, and rather end it on that high note than live to be disappointed with everything that comes after. I would never condone suicide, but this is a wonderful display of the character's sincerity. Zenos is a selfish, uncaring bastard, but he has always been 100% upfront with what's important to him, and I thought his death in 4.0 was perfect. And then he survives his death. This was the beginning of the period where I was really uncertain how I felt about him. As much as I loved Zenos in base Stormblood, he was just some distant looming threat in the background for all of Shadowbringers. And after the masterpiece that was Emet-Selch and Elidibus, I was hungry for something more than a rematch with a bad guy I had already beaten once.
Does the pursuit of prey you have bested before excite you? Of course not. Absent the challenge, the thrill, your prize is a hollow victory. Butchery.
So heading in Endwalker, I admit I was worried there wasn't going to be an interesting villain. Luckily, I was very wrong on that front. Going through Ultima Thule, we encounter story after story of worlds giving up in the face of hopelessness, and come face to face with the personification of all the despair in the universe. Only to have our old friend Zenos break in and say,
"But why does it still live? Surely it is no match for you." I assumed you would be above something so banal as despair. Am I mistaken?
Considering how Zenos had taken a backseat in the story of Endwalker, to have him show up at this moment and ask us, why haven't we beaten Despair yet? Was a wonderful shift in tone to lead us into the de facto final boss. It's safe to say that Zenos is not the most important character in Endwalker. In fact, you can have almost the exact same story without him entirely. I actually think the final showdown with him after the final day almost spoiled the ending. But here's the line that saved it for me.
Besieged by their banality, the world is a mire of tedium and trivialities. But in these fleeting moments, there is a spark, blinding, brilliant, gone too soon.
Nihilism is one of the major themes in Endwalker. A rejection of moral principles and the belief that life is meaningless. From a cosmic point of view, I even agree that we are a speck on a speck in an unimaginably huge universe, and anything we do ultimately has no real meaning. But this has never bothered me, because I kind of agree with Zenos. In the dark, uncaring universe, I've found a spark. Lots of them, actually. I care about stuff, just like everyone else, regardless of the state of the universe. And even though Zenos was a selfish, horrible person in almost every regard, he was a great character in the story who reminded us that our lives can have any meaning we want. So even though we probably didn't need Zenos and Endwalker, I'm glad he was there at the end.